Good morning and welcome to today's Pedagogical Corner. We have The Simplest Discovery, Part 1, a pedagogical discussion by Jonathan Tennenbaum. The fundamental crisis of civilization is forcing the question, where do the ideas come from? Which we find in our own heads and those of our fellow human beings, and which determine mankind's ability or inability to survive the onrushing crisis. The short answer is that apart from the products of oligarchical manipulation, corruption, and decay, everything positive in our culture, not only science and technology, but the concepts of everyday life and language itself, derives from nothing but the generation and assimilation of validated discoveries of principle made by individual human minds as measured on the metric of increase in the per capita potential population density of the human species. The power of the oligarchy, of course, depends to a large extent on the success of its own massive efforts to cover up and distort the historical generation of culture, including science, while promoting popular belief in various varieties of empiricism and so-called innate or self-evident ideas. It is worth stressing that the battle against oligarchical obfuscation of the history of ideas was a center of concern to the American Republican circles around Schiller, Humboldt, and Gauss et al. At the beginning of last century. Moreover, exactly the concept of positive human culture as the result of integration of individual acts of resolution of fundamental paradoxes by the Platonic method of hypothesis was key to the revolutionary work of, among others, Gauss, Weber, and Riemann on the anti-entropic geometry of physical space-time. Riemann discusses this explicitly in his posthumous fragments on epistemology, which provide a most useful background for comprehending his 1854 paper on the hypotheses underlying geometry. Consider, in particular, the following passage translated from Riemann's posthumous fragment entitled Attempt at a Theory of the Fundamental Concepts of Mathematics and Physics as the Basis for the Explication of Nature. Note that in this location, Riemann employs the term Begriff, concept, or Begriffssystem, system of concepts, in a sense congruent with Lin's use of fundamental assumption and hypothesis, respectively. Quote, on the basis of the concepts through which we grasp the natural world, we not only constantly supplement our observations, but in addition, we determine certain future observations in advance as necessary, or in case our system of concepts is not sufficiently complete, as probable. On this basis, it is determined what is possible, i.e., also what is necessary, or that whose opposite is impossible. Furthermore, the degree of possibility, the probability of every single event so judged possible, every single event so judged possible, can be mathematically determined when the concepts are sufficiently precise. If an event occurs which is necessary or probable according to the given system of concepts, then that system is thereby confirmed. It is on the basis of this confirmation through experience that we base our confidence in those concepts. But if something unexpected occurs, being impossible or improbable according to the given system of concepts, then the task arises to enlarge the system, or where necessary to transform it, in such a way that the observed event ceases to be impossible or improbable according to the enlarged or improved system of concepts. The extension or improvement of the conceptual system constitutes the explanation of the unexpected event. Through this process, our understanding of nature gradually becomes more comprehensive and more true, while at the same time reaching ever deeper beneath the surface of the phenomena. The history of the exact sciences, as far as we can follow it backwards in time, demonstrates that this, in fact, is the pathway by which our knowledge of nature has progressed. The system of concepts which formed the basis of our present understanding of nature were generated by progressive transformations of older conceptual systems, and the reasons that pushed forward the generation of new modes of explanation can in every case be traced back to contradictions or improbabilities arising in older modes of explanation. Thus, the generation of new concepts, insofar as it is accessible to observation, occurs by this process. Herbart, on the other hand, has provided proof that those concepts upon which our conceptualization of the world is based, but whose origins we can neither trace back in history nor in our own development, because they are transmitted together with language without being noticed, all of those concepts, insofar as they are more than mere forms of connection between simple sense perceptions, can be derived from the above source, and need not be attributed to some special property of the human soul assumed to predate all experience, as Kant claimed to do with his categories. End quote. Often it is most instructive in exploring the implications of a fundamental principle such as Riemann's to focus attention on the most deceptively simple cases of the sort fools would be likely to dismiss as being too obvious to be worth thinking about. Take, for example, the everyday concept of a day. What could be more self-evident? Does Riemann actually mean to say that there is a real creative discovery embedded in that idea? What would have been the paradox or paradoxes whose resolution gave birth to the concept of a day? Evidently, the discovery involved predates history in the usual sense. What we might do is try to project ourselves mentally back to a hypothetical, very, very distant point in time in which the concept of a day did not exist, and then ask what paradoxes must intrinsically confront a mind in the process of freeing itself from a naive, beast-like belief in the primacy of sense perception. First, reflect on the following. Could we discover anything without memory? Is a pot-headed Yahoo who cannot remember what he saw or did 5 minutes earlier able to make scientific discoveries? Would a Yahoo ever have been able even to discover the existence of a day as a recurring cycle of light and darkness? Or was the development of poetry as a means of development of the powers of memory crucial to the emergence of human civilization? Pre-Socratic Greek tradition often spoke of the origin of the universe in terms of the creation of order, cosmos, out of chaos. Does this not exactly describe the subjective process by which a human mind frees itself from the blind impulses of animal instinct and sense certainty? The world of the existentialist Yahoo, or a newly born infant, is a kind of chaos, a kaleidoscope of feelings replacing each other in more or less rapid succession. Mankind could not survive were it not possible to awaken a power of creative discovery in the infant or the supposedly infant-like primitive man, a mental function energized by the most powerful form of human emotion, agape. It is that agapic power, inseparable from the faculty of memory, as understood by the Renaissance, which conquers the chaos of bestiality and creates the cosmos of human development as an ordering of successive acts of discovery. Next, consider the elementary paradox of change, as it is addressed by the simplest of astronomical discoveries. The following exploration is hypothetical, but necessarily touches upon a discovery actually made, and in fact made repeatedly in various forms in human history. You are a prehistoric human being, living perhaps 500,000 years ago. On a beautiful, clear night, you seek a place to lie down under the open sky, gaze up, and from there at the magnificent canopy of the heavens. The myriad stars shine down on you in majestical silence, like little lights affixed to a lofty dome. Here is peace, here is rest. You close your eyes and relax. You awaken later that night. As your eyes once more open to the sky, you are struck with a sudden sense of strangeness. Something is different. Something has happened. The stars seem to have changed. Looking around, you recognize a group of bright stars whose form you remember having remarked before you took your nap. That group of stars is no longer where it was before. The stars have changed position. Changed? How is that possible? You stare intently at the stars. Not the slightest motion is perceptible. Only a gentle twinkling while they remain seemingly immovable in their places. Ah, a paradox. On the one hand, your faculty of sense perception swears to you that the stars are fixed and motionless. On the other hand, you remember that the same faculty has earlier testified, no less insistently, of an arrangement of stars in the sky which is different from the one it now reports. Intrigued, you repeat the experiment, but with a variation. You ask a friend to keep watching the stars without interruption during the time your eyes are closed. The experiment is performed. Once again, you find an undeniable change in the positions of the stars when you look at the sky again after a nap. Your friend, however, swears he never saw the stars move. The paradox strikes deep into your mind. Whatever follows will depend on how you respond to the paradox. However you respond, or even if you do not respond, that response will reflect some sort of hypothesis, an hypothesis generated nowhere but inside your own mind. Shall you merely conclude that your eyes or those of your friend have lied to you in some arbitrary fashion, or that the universe itself is maliciously arbitrary? If so, then how would human existence be possible? Or is there another way out? Perhaps we should not completely reject the evidence of our senses. Perhaps it were better to assume that although our sense perceptions in themselves do not represent reality, still there must be some implicitly discoverable lawful relationship between sense perception and reality. This is the pathway of science. Choosing that pathway, the paradox moves us to hypothesize the existence of something which our senses, in virtue of some lawful limitation of the same, cannot grasp. To hypothesize a concept of a process of change which in itself is invisible to the senses, but yet efficiently accounts for the observed, or rather remembered, difference in positions. That adduced concept of an invisible but efficient process of change is an object of a different sort than a sense perception, including the paradoxical entity we commonly identify as the perception of motion. It is not sufficient to account for that new concept by merely saying the stars move too slowly for our eyes to see. The point is that the paradox just presented evokes the potential of a new quality of relationship of our mind to the universe, a change in the substance of our mind. Prior to the explosion of the paradox, you looked at the universe, the starried heavens, as an object of sense perception. Now you are looking at the universe from the standpoint of a process of discovery, which stands in ironical contrast to naive belief in sense perception. To the reflecting mind, that difference in mental attitude from before to now provokes the hypothesis of higher species of change, a process of improvement of human cognitive powers, which is invisible to our senses, but real and earth-shakingly powerful nonetheless. Turning once more to our nightly observations, what shall be our next step? Does our power of discovery give us the capability to hypothesize not only the existence, but also the form of the process of change of position of the stars? How would we discover the coherence between the paradox of the star's motion and a similar paradox posed by the behavior of the sun? And how could we do that using nothing more than the means which were available to prehistoric man? Lest the reader find the above discussion too trivial to be important, consider the following. Nearly everyone today is faced, or will be soon, with a congruent form of paradox. On the one hand, most people would claim that their most deeply held values and beliefs, being absolutely self-evident to them, are fixed and unchangeable. On the other hand, comparing those people's deeply held personal values of today with the corresponding values held self-evidently by those same people 30 years ago, we find almost nothing in common. If mankind is to survive, an increasing ration of leading and ordinary citizens must be brought to discover as an enemy image the process of which the oligarchy was able to induce that radical downward paradigm shift in their own minds.